Hi there, this is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. That's OutBuro.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. We are trying the videos once again. We did do a video with Celia Daniels and then just did a few audios. We're going to be trying to do more videos as we move forward and then extracting that audio for the podcast. On any of the episode shows, if you're wondering where to find this, on any of the episode shows or the OutBüro.com main podcast page, simply check out just right under the main headings, you will see three bars that are in gray, and one will say where to listen and follow this podcast. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and many others. Please follow us on your favorite application today, and at any time you can come to the OutBüro episode page to view the full video interviews like we're doing today with the fantastic and fun today, Matthew French. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dennis. I'm super stoked to be here. I really appreciate us getting to have some time to chat.
Awesome, awesome. And look at that fun background that we have for Matthew, and that is because his company that is called Awesomely Authentic, and where he is a career coach to students as well as professionals throughout their entire career, from entry level, such as students entering into the career marketplace, to mid-career and even senior career professionals. He helps you focus on your career and communicating what you have achieved and the value proposition that you have for prospective employers. So very pertinent to not only our OutBüro on LinkedIn group, where we have over currently nearly 46,500 global members, but our site as OutBüro.com, focusing on the LGBT professional and entrepreneur. So as an entrepreneur who is also focusing on the career space, thank you so much for joining us, Matthew, again. And if you could, please, let's start out by giving a little bit of kind of your career background and bringing you up to today, which will pivot, but give us a little bit of background as to your education, your background, and how that has begun to lead you into the direction that you are now taking as I believe you're more of a startup, and but you have a long history which is giving you the foundation for this new startup. So give us some info.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I feel like with a lot of people in career services, so that's where a lot of my background comes from. I went to Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, from a small town in Virginia called Pocahontas, Virginia. So you should totally check it out. It's very small. If you want to ride four-wheelers or something in the woods, that's a great place to go.
Okay.
And then I went to Old Dominion, did an undergraduate in communications, got really involved in the queer community during that time, working in student orgs, being a part of Hampton Roads LGBT Center. And then I was a comm undergrad, so I was not sure what to do with that degree. I had dabbled in the world of entertainment through being a casting director, and it just didn't fill up my cup, you know?
Okay.
So I decided to go to grad school, and I went to grad school at Old Dominion University, where I focused on lifespan and digital communication, and specifically LGBT identities around fan communities, so around superheroes, and then I also focused on LGBT identities and how they focused around technologies, like using technology to stay connected, and specifically looking at apps like Grindr. But during grad school, I got connected to my career center. I was like, cool, I get to plan events, I get to help students, I get to reach out to employers, this will be fun. And so I did that, and that really led me on my whole career path of helping others demonstrate, communicate their value to employers, and how to best kind of demonstrate that not only to employers, but to themselves. I feel like a lot of the people I work with really undervalue their skill sets.
Interesting.
It's an interesting world when you're talking to people about their skills and their experiences and how they can utilize those. So working with students at Marymount Manhattan College was my first job out of grad school up in New York City in the Upper East Side. Small liberal arts school, about 2,000 students, mostly performing arts, some business. And then I switched over to UNC Charlotte about 5 years ago, where I did career advising mostly for, again, liberal arts and science, arts, media, design, and focusing in on an industry of arts, media, and design. So helping communicate everything from engineering to communications to business. If you want to work with Disney, you fall under my under my roof. So I would talk with those students about how to best frame their experiences for that particular industry. And continually through all of this, staying engaged with the LGBTQ community through different ways. And once COVID hit, I just had a lot of outreach from people. A lot of help was needed. And through leadership that I have and mentors that I've had, they really encouraged me to, start my own consulting to help queer people find the spaces where they could flourish. Because I'm a big believer, I'm weird. And I think everyone has that right to be as weird or not weird as they want to be in their job, to be as authentic as they can. So I love to keep it fun and funky and fresh and just kind of pulling from the 90s vibe of like bright colors to really set that tone for getting that professional experience started.
Gotcha. And so, sometimes it's really hard for people to break through the noise. When you're looking at resume after resume, or, once you've passed that artificial intelligence span and you're getting to
Dun,
that
dun,
human,
dun.
yeah,
Yes.
having your resume look really polished, but having that spin, having that color palette, that layout, that main headline, and so forth, that speaks to the professional side, but also just has that pop and wow factor.
Yeah.
That grabs that attention. I think that's really important. And from what I've seen, it seems like that's something that you focus on bringing out the personalities of the people as well.
Totally. Yeah. So this is like a fun little tidbit that I always encourage people to do is one way when you're figuring out your brand and how you're going to look to employers. A lot of times people are just like, I don't know where to start with that. So the best way to start is start with yourself and thinking about what are maybe 3 brands that you love, that you use a lot, you like what they're doing in the world, anything like that. And then once you have those 3 brands, go through their Instagram, go through their website, look at their logos, see what colors they have and which ones speak to you. And you'll usually see common themes around colors, texts, shapes that you can then kind of take and metamorphosize into your own personal brand that you can then use on your resume, that bleeds over into your LinkedIn. If you have your own website, it can bleed over to there. It can bleed over to OutBüro. It's really about creating a consistent narrative about who you are and letting that be the authentic self. So that way employers are like, you come to life for me. You're more than just a resume. I understand who you are based off of just looking at the tones and textures of across all these platforms.
Yeah, I completely agree in that, as a professional, you really do need to set your own brand out there. And interestingly, I forget his name off the top of my head, but there is a person in my LinkedIn connections, and he's also in the group. And I wish I could pull his name up right now, but he's a realtor in in Canada. Forget which, it's not one of the main cities, or it'd be popping to my head. But what was really interesting is, as a realtor, he has these small video monologues, and he talks about connecting with his audience. And one video that he did literally just a week ago already has like over 250 likes, over 100 comments, and well, I even commented to him. I rarely reach out and go beyond the purely professional realm, but because we're connected and we've had a little bit of dialogue in the past, and he was questioning whether he should or someone else was questioning whether he should still be doing it and what purpose of it is it and so forth. And he's like, this is my brand. This is what I'm doing. And I actually messaged him. I said, oh, keep it up, handsome. It's like, hello. Also, love your background, Danish modern bookcase behind and so forth. But you know, even when looking for a job, what I recommend for people to do is, you know, whether that's on LinkedIn, and hopefully you're also creating your brand on outburo.com, outburo.com, is I constantly invite people to, no matter what field they're in, to begin writing and publishing articles, even if that's just 1 or 2 or 3 articles about their knowledge, their take on the industry, their take on the technology, whatever that happens to be, so that in addition to a professional profile, which is indexed and searched and so forth, and people can find you. And when employers do then find you on that site, they know you identify and or an ally with the LGBT community, which, you know, is diversity and inclusion recruiting. But then as they see those articles that are also being posted, they see, oh, not only did they go to this school and have this degree and have this bit of, you know, professional education, look, they're also, look at these articles that they've written in and around that topic. This is the kind of person that we want to hire. Someone who seems very comfortable in their knowledge and their ability to communicate that knowledge. Because, you know, today, in today's time, it's very important to not only have the technical skills, but have those soft skills as well. And being able to communicate, you know, your knowledge and taking complex ideas and theories and so forth and bringing them down into whether that's a video conversation, and of course you can also post videos on the site, and or articles that demonstrates that you thoroughly understand your topic. And it's going to make those employers go, wow, that's a really interesting person. I've liked the content that they produced, these few articles. That really has helped set them apart in my mind.
And it's value added. It's value added, right? It's, if you're able to speak and demonstrate that you're up on the industry standards, and you're also able to, again, like you said, communicate those things. Employers are always looking for more tidbits, again, to give them a more full picture of your narrative and who you are as a brand. So if you're able to write those things out, you know, I have to admit, I am not the best writer, but you put me on a video and I am there for it. So I already, like on my website, I know writing just isn't my strong suit. It's not something I really enjoy, but I really love doing vlogs. So I transitioned mine from a blog to a vlog because it's working to my skills and my strengths, but it's also a part of the brand, you know, it's excitement, you know, and it's trying to get that out there. And that's what people have to think about when you're thinking about your brand and you're thinking about how employers are going to perceive you. It's always important to think about, what is this demonstrating as a skill set, right? What is it demonstrating that you're good at public speaking? Is it demonstrating that you're detail oriented? Because the one thing, especially detail oriented, I cannot tell you how many people have put, I'm detail oriented, and then they have a misspelling in their resume. So it's like actually demonstrating those skill sets at work. It also gives you work samples, things you can add to your portfolio. Again, it's all about giving the employer more information on the upfront, because that will also help if employers start searching for you, right? If you're on LinkedIn and OutBüro and you have your own website, the likelihood of them digging in then and going for, let's say, your Instagram or your Facebook, maybe places you don't want them to see as much of, that's less likely because they've already gotten enough to understand you as a professional from the things that you've already put out there that you are controlling.
Well, speaking of those other apps, I will say on outburo.com, I've written twice, one article on security and privacy for the LGBT professional, and it's all about, you know, locking your stuff down. And one of the things in a couple of articles that I've written is, you know, just be very, very cautious and think really hard about the kinds of things that you post on any platform, because once it's posted,
it's never gone.
It's never gone. And you may think that, oh, I've deleted it from Facebook, so therefore it doesn't exist. Bullshit. It's still out there. It's still on those servers, because just because you delete something does not mean it's truly deleted.
Totally.
And when you think about even those apps like you mentioned, Grinder, okay, one, there's also I've written about, and people can Google this, is that the U.S. government has warned about that, and TikTok, that they could be security issues because they share so much information with marketers and so forth, and going to a point too is just when you think you're in that one-on-one conversation with that hot stud and you're sending those pics,
Yeah.
know that that can be screen captured, very easily, and used tomorrow against you, or used at any point in the future against you. So just be very, very cautious. Everyone, be very, very cautious about what you send on any platform. And
Totally.
of course, yeah, and of course on OutBüro, it's only professionally oriented content. No hot torso shots. Love them from my boys on Facebook, but it's not appropriate for the workspace.
And
So
that is actually a good point. I would like to touch on that a little bit, because it is a different aspect than what professional career counselors sometimes have to deal with. When you're coming from the queer community, we've created our own spaces where we're safe, right? So whether that be a drag bar or a LGBTQ center, or it used to be a lot of like Craigslist, or those types of areas. Being aware of your brand and how those things can come back to you. So having those conversations around, and I do it with clients, quite a bit, of saying like, what platforms do you use? Like, be aware that you're currently around people who are seeing you. So if you don't want to be out at work, or you want to come out on your own terms, that could hurt you if someone works at that institution or works at that company and they're on Grindr or one of the apps, right? So it's being aware that those things can come to you, and being aware, like on your Instagram, believe me, if I had a six-pack, I would show it off as well. But what does that communicate to an employer if most of your shots tend to be of yourself, barely clothed in some instances? And a lot of employers I've spoke with, because I've worked with 2,000 plus employers now from across industries, and the thing that they say consistently, especially around millennials and Gen Z, below millennials, is that what they worry about with us the most is that we are self-serving and self-obsessive. And so I've had employers tell me that if someone on their Instagram has too many selfies, that's a red flag for them, because they think they're very self-centered, and they worry about their team work abilities. So it's being aware of like, what does that communicate to you?
Interesting. Okay. So it needs to be more group photos.
Group photos, throw a dog in there if you got a pup, like, take a picture of some flowers, I don't know, but it's really thinking through like that brand. And I'm always very cautious. Actually, I don't want to say I'm cautious. I'm cognizant that, everything I post is going to be seen by someone. And, even sometimes adding in that little blurb, if you're currently working, like, views are my own, right? Because there are a lot of employers that are cracking down on, you're not allowed a certain amount of social media. I know of employers in higher ranking government offices where they will actually sit down with you and want to go through all of your private messages on Facebook and Instagram. So it's a lot. So you just got to be aware. That's all this really is just like awareness building,
Right. Yeah, especially in the government entities, if you're going for any level of security clearance, you depends on what you post. That could be done. You could be over. So word of caution for everyone: lock your stuff down, and keep it clean. If you need to, go back and do your best. Yes, it'll still be out there on servers, but not publicly visible.
Totally.
I, for one, my Facebook is locked down. Only people who are connected with me see what I post. But what I post is very simple. Yes, I do go hiking, and I occasionally post a hiking picture. But I don't post a lot. Nothing like I do on LinkedIn. Like once or twice a week on Facebook, and that's it. So
Exactly.
anywho, folks, heed the warning from a career coaching professional. Be aware. Read the articles on OutBureau about privacy, and just take that into mind. So one of the other things that when we had our first conversation a minute ago or so is the concept of should you be out on your resume? Since you're focusing a lot of your attention, although not exclusively, on the LGBT community, could you talk a little bit about, being out, having indicators on your resume that you're part of the LGBT community, and what you have seen in and around that?
Sure. So the first question I always ask is, where are you at, and where do you want to, how open do you want to be at your place of work? My boyfriend is a perfect example. He is an occupational therapist at a retirement community, or working with a lot more elderly folks. So, and he's not really been involved in the queer community, but in his instance, like, he feels more comfortable, like that's his work life, and then this is his home life. A couple people at work know, but not, it's not something he's out about. Whereas me, on the other hand, I am out. Like, everyone knows it. I'm involved in queer things on campus. I'm involved in queer things in the community. So it's really deciding for yourself, how out do you want to be? And then we work from there. So let's take an example, and this is something we talked about, was, let's say you're working at an LGBT center, or you volunteered in an LGBT center, right? You're learning a lot of awesome skills there. You can learn things about communication, working with people during crises, doing programming, building networks, all of those awesome things that you can bring to a company. Now, if you're thinking about, I want to be out on my resume, those are great little signifiers to just demonstrate that you're queer or an ally. So you can definitely then focus on those skills. But if you're even thinking, well, I don't know if I want to come right out like that, you could say that you're part of a community service organization, and then you focus on those skill sets, because those skill sets are the majority and the chunk that matters. But where it really changes up is you got to think past the resume too. You have to think past resume and think, I'm going to have to go into an interview. Do I want to bring my significant other to the holiday party? Do I want to have a picture of them on my desk? Those are all things you have to think through, and it's hard to think through that on your own, especially if you're going into particular industries or sections, or you're at different hiring levels. These are all things you want to take into account. I mean, my personal perspective is the biggest thing that matters are the skill sets that you're learning there. And that's what we want to always communicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've definitely seen a wide array, and this goes for everything, like people who have things like around religion on their resume, party affiliations, anything like that. And there are some employers that I always say get a little iffy if something SJW, like social justice warrior, comes up in there. They get nervous because they're like, well, are they going to cause us think about something, right? And then that's when you need to think, is that a place I want to be?
Right.
It's okay for you to interview the employer and decide if that's a good place for you to be, and professionally and personally.
Right. Well, I think that's a good point there, and it's especially in today's time, you have to make those personal decisions. And I have being in the LinkedIn group, that I've had people say, because also their career paths and they have none of their skill set has come from working with LGBT organizations, and therefore they, was not pertinent to their career. And, so people have been like, well, it adds no value, so why would I put that? Well, of course, but there's also people who have, there's some very wonderful large LGBT focused organizations that have 50, 100, 600 employees, and you could be working in their IT department for several years, and maybe you've done some amazing things within that organization, and you worked there for 3 and 4 years, and now transitioning to a different job, and putting that skill set is very pertinent. And having having it on your resume, it's everyone has their own personal journey and their own personal comfort level. Some people are again like, well, it has no pertinence. I'm you know, this is my career and I just treat it as a non-issue and it's nobody's business what I do at home. And then other people are like, you know, no, I want to make sure that they're going to accept me and my full rainbow self. And if they don't, screw them, because I don't want to go to work for someone who's not going to accept me and all my fabulousness, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, everyone is on their own spectrum. And so there's no right or wrong answer to that question. It's for you to answer for your individual self with you and your individual career path. And, you know, maybe for your career, you need to work for a period at a homophobic organization just because you want that skill set that they're going to offer for a year or two, but you know it's going to be like, all right, I'm going to walk in there, I'm going to keep my head down, I'm going to get that on my resume, then I'm going to be like, you, bye-bye, next. I mean, I've had people talk about that too. Like they knew that they were walking into an extremely homophobic environment, but they knew they were going to endure that just because it was the only place that they could get the particular stuff on the resume that they needed for the next jump. And I think that's also very important when you're looking at your career, because I get hit with questions all the time, and I'm always looking. It's like, look, I'm not the professional, you know, career coach. I'm not the professional diversity and inclusion consultant, but here are the people who are, FYI. So I can now refer to you. But as I tell people in the past, it's like, yeah, sometimes, you know, when you're looking at your career, you need to think about where you're going to be, where you want to be 5 years from now, and look for a job and a company that's going to give you the skills that you're going to need for your next move. You know, constantly be looking at, because that's why you have to interview essentially and assess that organization. Does it have the job, the reputation that you want? And does it have the job opportunity that's going to take you to that next level, either within that company or another company? Because let's face it, companies are not loyal to you. They're only loyal to their profits.
Yep.
So most companies are, you know, like even here in Florida, it's a work at will state, or at will state, meaning that they can let you go for no cause whatsoever at any time with no recourse. So many states are like that. And as soon as, and, you know, unfortunately with the COVID, you know, we've seen so many people have been laid off, I mean, with cause, but, you know, just realize that companies are not going to look out for you, period. You have to look out for you. So you are the numero uno, because as soon as their profits start dipping, they're going to say goodbye. They're going to say, so sorry, we're laying you off. So you need to take that into your mind, and you need to realize that it's no longer like my dad worked for 2 employers his entire life. You know, it's no longer that way. And so you have to think of strategically, what does this employer add value to me? Do they have all the benefits that I want? Do they have domestic partner benefits? Do they have all the LGBT benefits and inclusivity that I can actually go to work, be proud to work there? And for those people that I know throughout my career history, is this the type of employer that I would recommend to others? And if not, again, maybe it's a strategic move on your part, but you know, you as an LGBTQ person need to seriously think, is this the kind of employer that I want to work for? Because, and just don't take, and hopefully all of you out there will start rating your current and recent past employers anonymously on outbureau.com, because frankly, we'll see. I'm not trying to beat folks up. I'm not. It's just facts, sweetie. But, you know, when you look at the list of employers who rank 100% on the HRC, Human Rights Campaign Fund Corporate Equality Index, don't think at all that 100% score is much more than, yes, effort, but mostly a lot of marketing. Are many of the organizations very proud and so forth? Yes. However, don't think that just because a corporation has achieved the very few limited 1,000 level companies who have the privilege to be on that list and paid the money to be on that list, $21 million a year total. So it's not cheap. So realize though that even, for example, Goldman Sachs, again, not trying to beat folks up, just truth and facts and news is in the news. Okay, they've been on the list of HRC's Corporate Equality Index, ranked 100% for several years. And even just this past year, yet again, was touted as one of the best places in the financial sector to work for. Okay, and they just had to settle a lawsuit where someone was, after 8 years of working there, got a new boss, and that new boss was a homophobic asshole and started making comments like, "Are you doing this because you're gay? Uh, why do you have to sound so gay?" And making comments like that, to the point where he brought it to HR. No action was taken until it got so bad that finally, guess what? They fired him, saying that he was not interested in his work any longer. Well, excuse me, there's a hostile work environment where I'm constantly being berated and discriminated against and harassed for being who I am as an LGBT person. HR hasn't taken any actions against it, except to, so yeah, might someone's work performance decline a little bit because they don't feel comfortable in their workspace and they don't feel safe? Sure, but they used that as a reason to fire that person, which has been retaliation. So there was a lawsuit in and around that. So I'm just saying, be aware, folks. Be
And I would say,
aware.
like, that's, and I think that's, you know, from the career coach perspective, I would say if a client came to me about those issues, I always, you know, definitely talk about what are your legal protections. But the thing that a lot of us as LGBTQ people have to sometimes take on, that we don't always want to take on, right, is the spaces that we inhabit, by us just being there, is politicized and
Yeah.
is made different, right? So a lot of the times what we're charged with is, when we encounter those spaces, is I always encourage clients to think through, like, is this a space where you want to try to make change? Is this a space where you want to back away? And again, helping them kind of think through those things. I mean, I'm an educator, I'm from education. So I've been a part of a lot of like LGBTQ equality things over the years. So I'm usually in the space of like, I'm going to educate and I'm going to kind of change from within and try to find ways that I can make that change. Like going to people and being like, we need to go to the LGBT ERG. We need to talk about this. Like making a rustle about the things that like are not connecting, right? If they're on the HRC Equality Index, why is this happening to me?
Right.
And going into many organizations do not vet people based on their perceptions on diversity and inclusion.
No.
And you have to like hit those people sometimes head on. And it's really that decision. It's not fair that we have to take up the mantle of being an educator or an activist in our role sometimes. But it's kind of sometimes the name of the game of thinking through. And I always like to think through it as, you know, as a queer person who I'm okay with speaking up, like at least if I speak up now in an organization, hopefully that makes at least some sort of change for the future. And that's really what it's about. Is, again, a lot of, you know, career coaches sometimes will use blanket type of advice. It doesn't work that way with queer people. We're all coming from such diverse backgrounds. We're all facing different intersectionalities of our identity around race, gender, socioeconomic status, that every single instance can be handled in a different way depending on your personal preference. And so, if, you know,
Right.
for the person that's there, like, you know, I would have definitely have like encouraged them, like, what resources are available there, what resources are available, you know, around the surrounding community, and how do you connect those to make do, or do what, you know, if you're no longer able to do your job because of those types of threats and those types of feelings that someone is targeting you. I mean, I think it's very well to like go the legal route. It's something that has to be done because change a lot of the times can be messy, and it's important for people not to go into looking at an employer like, oh, they have these ratings, and there's a lot of different rating systems. Just because they have those ratings does not mean that everyone at that company has that perception. I think where it becomes troublesome too is if your human resources departments are not stepping in. And that's where I've never been one to be like hierarchy, right? Like, oh, I report to this manager, and so I tell them that, and then they'll go and tell that person. I am the first one, like if my direct supervisor does not do anything or I feel like there's nothing being done, I'm the first one to jump over everybody and be like, okay, we'll just go to the head honcho because clearly, so it's really kind of like setting up those steps. And that's where someone like, talking to local community members, reaching out on LinkedIn, posting about on OutBüro, that's where you can find what are some strategies of working around a lot of these things.
Absolutely. And, I'd like to clarify, I've been very, very vocal in my writings on it's, again, I'm not trying to beat up, it's just news facts, right? Mm-hmm. And there's other organizations that I've used in my examples in the past. But, the thing is that the policies of a company are the intent and also the CYA, frankly, to help mitigate litigation in the future. For example, a lot of the companies who have LGBTQ inclusive policies also have what's called forced arbitration, which means when you come on board as an employee, you are signing away your right to publicly sue them, so if you get discriminated against or harassed, you cannot put forth a public lawsuit. You are forced into arbitration, which doesn't see the light of public day. It keeps it out of, and no, so you can't talk about it. So that way it keeps their image from it being known. So that's why when you do post on OutBüro, it's anonymous. We know who you are, but it's anonymous publicly. So that you can still share it. Also, just in case you still feel like there's a potential of issue, I actually created a catch-all employer box called OutBüro, so that because it's really important for those issues to become known as a collective. And over time, the goal is that that we'll be able to, as more and more people utilize the services and input the demographics and all those kinds of things as part of their review, that will actually be able to partner with folks like yourselves on the educational side to provide statistical data through it. But realizing, as you pointed out, that these large organizations who have these wonderful, and I do applaud everyone who has them, it's a step in the right direction, but when they have 100, just using the example of 100,000 employees, as you stated, all of those employees, when an organization enacts, LGBT-friendly policies, non-discrimination policies, and so forth, that doesn't just automatically, overnight turn all 100,000 employees into pro-gay. Yeah, rainbow waving, unicorn riding, loving, magical land, right? They still have their biases and so forth, those lifelong learned prejudices and biases that it's a lot to overcome. We've seen that on race, and we've seen it on sexual harassment. Sexual harassment has been illegal here in the United States since 1978. Every year, corporations put all kinds of effort into annual training, signing off, and so forth, and yet it still happens, right? So, that's something to. So it's not that I'm not trying to beat up organizations at all, but I'm just trying to be, reality check, because when I don't want companies to think that just because they are on those corporate equality index lists that we think they're perfect, because they're not perfect.
The work is never done. The work is never done when you're dealing with these identities. Our identities like I said, are politicized, and it is what it is. And
And
that's where we're having to work within the spectrums of like heterosexual life daily. So it is
true.
definitely,
So
it's definitely
for
something we have to kind of like work through.
absolutely. And so for me, it's more about, it's not that issues happen, because issues will happen, like that
Yeah.
person being discriminated against, like, so many other examples I could toss out here of companies over this last year. But it's really about what you do with it that really makes a determination about who you are as a company and as an
Totally.
employer.
Yeah.
So, are you going to handle it when issues happen, whatever that is, whether it's sexual harassment happens in your workplace, whether clear racism happens in your workplace, whether clear anti-LGBT homophobia happens in your workplace? It's not that it happens within your company, because you can't control every single employee
Yeah.
24 hours a day, right? But you set the precedents and you set the intent based on your policies that you have. And then it's how you respond, how you react, and how you move forward from that instance forward is
Hmm.
what truly shines light on you as an employer. And so getting, kind of back to the coaching is that, you're focusing on the LGBT, folks, and those have got to be, conversations and issues and questions that,
Mm.
your current clients and future clients, I'm sure, are going to have.
They definitely do. So I can kind of give you a rundown of what I always suggest is, we first talk through industry, we talk through, company size, but some easy first kind of initial tips that I always give is simply looking at the EEO statement. And usually it'll be at the bottom of the page on their careers page or at the bottom of an application, job posting. See if sexual identity, see if sexual orientation and gender identity are listed, because those are still not protected classes federally. So there are states and stuff that protect it and have variations all across the board. But what that's really giving you is, yes, they might say they're pro LGBT, but if they're not covering those bases in just their EEO statement, that's an issue. And these are things as both with my clients and even advising students. So it is, research has shown that millennials and Gen Z who are going to be coming into the workforce, if a recruiter wants to recruit those applicants, they have to be an inclusive, diverse space. It's just what they're looking for. It's one of the top three things that across industry, no matter what they're doing, it's what students are looking for, what new applicants are looking for. So, looking at that EEO statement, are you using inclusive language, right? Are you using binary genders in describing your language, which is in describing your policies, both internal and external? Do you celebrate Pride Month? I mean, something as simple as an Instagram post can at least show that you're trying, right? At least demonstrate some sort of inclusion. Because the point of it is like, I never expect an employer to jump from, point A to point B in a matter of weeks.
Right.
It usually takes years, honestly,
It's a
because
progress.
it's a progress. And so, I always try to go about it in a way of like, let's find our common ground, let's find where we can work from, and then we'll work out from there, right? I think from what I've seen and working with clients, the ones that probably in the queer community who are most marginalized are trans women of color. They tend to face the most hardships when it comes to looking for employers, when it comes to finding opening spaces. Most employers still do not have a good grasp on trans inclusion in the workspace, trans policies that are positive for trans people, educating on trans issues. That is really the part of the queer community that in my view, around diversity and inclusion has really been left out. They can have a lot of these policies, but either they don't speak heavily enough on trans issues, or they try to, and I think this just goes to show education around it, they lump trans people in with LGBTQ in general. But we're all such a different, right? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, intersex, ally, asexual. We're all such different people with different experiences and different needs that it's really hard to lump us all together into one space and apply all things to us because it's just not the way it is. Like my
Yes.
medical coverage is going to need to be different from someone who's trans and is looking at transitioning, right? I might not need hormone therapy, but they might. So it's being aware of those things. And those are just growing pains that I see a lot of employers going through.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping, we can get the experiences of trans job seekers more relevant in front of employers, so that way they're like, oh, we didn't realize this is something that was missing. Or at least, at the very least, if you have it, make it freaking accessible and understandable for a lot of your employees who are trans.
Right, absolutely. And making it accessible is something that I think is very interesting you point on. And that was one of the reasons why, you know, OutBüro started, is because seeing, having conversations with people from my group, and then going to these organizations who have, the 100% score on the corporate equality index, but then not be able to find information.
It's true. It's so hard to find it.
Yeah, sometimes not even be able to find their EEO statement on their own website. And yeah, it's crazy. So, and I've talked with several diversity and inclusion directors of folks who are on that list, and they say, oh, well, for example, they say, oh, well, we have an employee resource group. Yeah, well, where is it? How do I know? How do I, as a candidate,
what is it called? Yeah.
know? And they go, oh, well, we don't put any of our employee resource groups on our public website. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
They're missing out on great branding that is demonstrating they're at least doing something in an organization.
Right.
And I think, it's controlled. I think it's controlled by so many different aspects that is probably one of the harder things, is getting a website to update to reflect what's happening internally to externally show people. And I think that's because sometimes, being queer makes people uncomfortable, who are not part of the LGBTQ community, who are not an ally. So they're like, well, we don't want to offend other people who may not identify with those communities. I feel like that's where some of that comes from,
Probably. And that's why the employer listing on OutBüro, I tout it as an employer branding platform for employers to reach the LGBT community. So all of those things can be listed, and lots of information there. So, if you work for an employer, or you are an employer who would like to reach the candidates, the LGBTQ inclusive candidates, lots of studies have been shown, and we'll soon be interviewing an author of a book who has pulled all that together to show the economic value of being inclusive. It actually is a win-win. It's a win for the employees. It's a win for the customers. It's a win for the owner of the business, and including the shareholders, because study after study has shown that when an organization takes on inclusivity in its broadest, in its fullest, being gender inclusive, race and ethnicity inclusive, religiously inclusive, LGBT, sexual orientation inclusive, that it creates where everyone can be their awesomely authentic self in work. That creates a place in which everyone can bring their ideas and thrive. And again, study after study after study have shown that the corporations financially benefit. So you would like, so it makes sense to do, makes financial sense to do. We have some information on outbureau.com about that. I'm actually right now in the process of booking an author who has written a new book about that, so stay tuned for that. All of it's going to tie together. And I guess just to wrap up things here, Matthew, you've talked very well about your why, which is very important for me. Everyone has to know, why they're doing something.
The why is important.
Yeah, so you're working basically a full-time job at a college, plus you're a startup entrepreneur. that means you're working lots of hours. So what are some of the ways that, I believe that it's very important to have balance in your life. And that can come through a lot of different ways. Both, mentally, spiritually, relationship, physically, etc. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us maybe one or two things that you do to help keep yourself balanced and grounded and keep your personal life on your path.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a lot of work. The good thing is whenever you're doing something that like you're just super passionate about, it doesn't tend to wear on me as much.
True.
But to keep myself and my mind from overloading and overheating, because that's usually what happens is my brain is going in a million different directions. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, so me and my boyfriend, we bought a house last year, so we have a beautiful backyard. I'm from the mountains, so I love wilderness and nature, so we spend a lot of time in our backyard, planting flowers, planting plants. We have so many plants, especially with COVID now. We planted a lot. And walking around barefooted outside, I love, because it's like there's a lot of research on grounding and like, energies and all this stuff. Nature has just always been that space where my favorite time is whenever it's getting ready to be a storm and it's warm and it's windy, but it's a little dark. And I just got there by myself and just sit and just listen and close my eyes. That is the most reviving thing, because I feel like I'm like recentering myself, because it's something I really love to think about is everything that we've created, even everything we've talked about today, it is literally shit pulled together. People just pull it together and they're like, oh, this makes sense. We'll just put this in that box. Okay, well, this word will mean that. And so things are created. And I think RuPaul does a really good job of explaining, like, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. It's true. It's all made up. The only thing that is not made up for me personally is nature and the world that I am walking on. And so that's how I recenter myself, to be like, it could be crazy. I could be dealing with clients who are going through some crazy stuff, clients who just got a job, an employer who maybe is having issues. But when I recenter myself, those things give me a little more clarity of being like, this is how we can fix it, because there's so many ways to fix it, because we are literally creating the world around us.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I'm a bit of a nature boy myself, so I've liked that. Well, awesome. Matthew, this has been a great conversation. I know that you and I are going to be staying in contact and hopefully working collaboratively as we move forward.
Yes,
So
sir.
thank you so much for joining us today, and fun background there. You pop on that there. Too cool. Well, again, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. This is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. You can tune in and see videos and listen to podcasts on sites such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and many others. You can check out this episode and additional episodes directly for its video content directly on OutBüro at outburo.com, choosing podcast up at the top, and scrolling through and or using the search. If you would like to be on the show, if you would like to talk about your profession, no matter what kind of profession that is, I say professionals are dog walkers all the way to NASA astronauts. So we would love to hear about your LGBTQ perspective. And if you are a business owner, we would love to hear about your journey as well. Tips, tricks, struggles, and so forth. Thank you so much again for tuning in. This is Dennis Velco with OutBüro Voices. Have a great weekend.
Hi, everybody.